Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking my stab at predicting what this Oregon Ducks depth chart is going to look like going into the 2025 year. And I think what should excite the Oregon Duck fans the most is you got a lot of different position battles at a lot of different spots in this depth chart. And you go back 12 months ago as we talked this Oregon team in the offseason, you kind of knew who the guys were going to be going into 2024. They returned a lot of really good football players from that 2023 football team. Going into 2025, there's going to be a lot of new faces at a lot of different positions. I'll say this, I don't think that's all that bad because I think there are a lot of good players on this team that didn't really get a ton of opportunities in 2024 that really can be dudes for Oregon in 2025. And I can see it now. The national media going to look at all the production that Oregon loses to the NFL draft, kind of write this team off. Look, there's a lot of good players on this team, and I think Dan Lanning has done a great job at creating what's called competitive depth. I mean, if you want to play for Oregon in 2025, you're going to have to beat out a lot of good football players. What does that ensure you come August 2025? That the players that are starting for Oregon, the players that are being difference makers, they're probably going to be pretty damn good football players. This is a really exciting exercise because it allows you to do a couple different things. One, call your shot. Like, who are the guys that are going to emerge in the offseason? I certainly have some hot takes involved. And then, secondly, it allows us to take this bird's eye view approach around this Oregon roster and say, hey, what do we look at? What do we look like right now? What are some potential additions we still need to make in the transfer portal? Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, one, let it rip in the comment section. I think you could pull 1,000 different Oregon fans and you'd probably get 1,000 different depth charts. A lot of different possibilities. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This is going to be one of the more fun teams to study and talk about in the offseason because there's going to be a lot of new. Let's start at the top, Dante Moore. The Oregon fans who've been rocking with the fellas for a while know I am all aboard the Dante Moore train heading into the 2025 year. This is a kid that the only sample size we have was him at UCLA, surrounded by just quite frankly, not a very good football team. And he was trying to do too much at times. But one thing that continues to pop out is the arm talent this kid brings. The ceiling that he brings to this Oregon offense, I would argue, is higher than Bo Nix. I think it's higher than Dylan Gabriel. This kid is extremely talented. And if he kind of took that 2024 year, really developed as a quarterback, going into 2025 as the guy, to me, the sky's the limit for this Oregon offense. There's been a lot of noise around Oregon going to the transfer portal and grabbing a quarterback. Name me a quarterback outside of maybe John Mateer that you have more confidence in with Dante Moore. Because to me, I'll take Dante Moore than the field that you saw in the transfer portal. Austin Novosad, I just want to give a quick shout out to him. He's remained steadfast with this Oregon program, has been surrounded by a lot of really good quarterbacks. Every time we see this kid, we're impressed. And so shout out Austin Novosad. I don't think he'll start in 2025, but I think he's a damn good football player. Running back room. Mekhi Hughes is the guy. I think Mekhi Hughes will be that true running back, one that probably takes 20 plus carries a game. Noah Whittington, we'll kind of see what decision he makes. And this is not a shot at Noah Whittington whatsoever. You look at him and say, I think Oregon's running back room is going to be just fine either way. Because even without Noah Whittington, I mean, Jay Harris and a ton of other running backs in this room. I mean, this is a very deep and talented running back room that has a lot of potential names to step up. I personally am a Jay Harris guy. Would like to see him get a little bit more buzz. And we'll see. There's a lot of good running backs in this room. If you were to ask me who emerges, I'm going to take Jay Harris. But I would respect a lot of different running backs that emerged as well. The wide receiver position, this is, to me, what is so interesting. What's it going to look like? Who are going to be the guys? I think Evan Stewart is, to me, clearly the wide receiver one heading into the 2025 year. And I think Evan Stewart is going to benefit greatly from Dante Moore at quarterback. Because you look at Evan Stewart, he's a guy that wants to work vertically down the field. And look, that's just not Dylan Gabriel's game. I mean, ever since Dylan Gabriel committed to Oregon, we kind of knew that Tez Johnson was going to be the featured wide receiver because that's the kind of wide receiver Dylan Gabriel has historically liked to go after and target. Dante Moore wants to push the ball down the field. Evan Stewart is that guy. I think Evan Stewart is going to have a really big season in 2025. Then you look at, all right, who's going to be number two? I'm going to Corey and Moore. Look, we just saw a ton of true freshmen at the wide receiver spot. Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, Cam Coleman have really big impacts as true freshmen at the wide receiver spot. I think the Corey and Moore is that kind of guy. I think he's a day one starter as a true freshman. Justice Lowe, probably going to be your starting slot. And then the fascinating conversation is, all right, who else emerges? You know, last year, 12 months ago, we knew it was going to be Evan, Tez, and Trayshawn Holden. Now it's all right. What does Kyle Casper look like? What does Jeremiah McClellan look like, who I think is an absolute guy for Oregon? Jurion Dickey going into year 3. You look at Malik Benson and say there were a lot of Oregon fans that were upset, that were concerned that the addition of Malik Benson squeezes out some of the young talent in this wide receiver room. Look, Dan Lanning's going to play the best wide receivers. And if you were to ask me who has a bigger impact on the offense going into 2025, I'm taking Jeremiah McClellan over Malik Benson. Now, what's exciting about Malik Benson and why I was a fan of the addition is, look, Malik Benson's got some traits, man. You know, 6'1", 200 pounds, 10'4" in the 100-meter dash. You don't see a lot of those guys growing on trees. And so I think Dan Lanning's approach there was, hey, let's just go take a shot on him. If he doesn't work out, we got a lot of confidence in Jeremiah McClellan, Kyle Casper, Jurion Dickey. But if he does, you might be getting a real difference maker, especially with this Oregon offense that's going to want to push the football down the field. You want a guy that goes 6'1", 200, running a 10'4" on the 100-meter dash. Offensive line, this is to me maybe the biggest question mark in terms of, let's look at the tackle position first. Credit Dan Lanning. I mean, he went out and grabbed 2 of the best offensive tackles in the portal. Isaiah World probably could have gone to the NFL had he wanted to, coming from Nevada. Alex Harkey coming from Texas State. You feel pretty good about both those guys plugging and playing at the tackle spot. You look at the inside, it sounds like Matthew Bedford's going to be back for another year. Poncho at center. The bigger concern for me is not the starting 5. Feel pretty good about the starting 5. What does the depth look like on the offensive line here? I think 2 really important names to monitor are the true freshmen, Douglas Utu, Zaire Addison. 2 guys that I think give you versatility in terms of guard tackle versatility. If they emerge as guys that Oregon can count on in that 2 deep, all of a sudden the concerns about the offensive line depth kind of get melted away. But if there was one concern for me off the bat here, is that you don't exactly know what the depth is going to look like for Oregon in the 2025 season on the offensive line. Going to the defense, to me, I think you're upgrading the defense in spots they needed to get upgraded. I think the biggest question mark is, can you replace a guy like Derek Carmen on the inside? And it sounds like Jamari Caldwell might be back, which would be huge for Oregon in 2025, because just from a number standpoint, from a depth standpoint, and I thought he played really good football towards the end of 2024. What do we get from Bear Alexander? Look, Bear Alexander has the capability of playing like Derek Carmen. It's just a matter of, hey, can we get the best out of Bear Alexander? And why I was such a big fan of Bear coming to Oregon was, look, he's coming into a really not only talented football team, but it's hard to argue this culture is not really, really dang good. And for a guy like Bear, I don't know what's going on off the field with him, but it was pretty clear that there was maybe some baggage there. And that's all I'll comment, because I don't like to comment on stuff I don't know. You bring in a super talented kid, and if you can maximize him, he's going to be a game wrecker for Oregon on the inside. I'm looking at Aiden Breland. I'm looking at Jericho Johnson. I'm looking at Teon Gray. Like, there were some guys that were true freshmen this year that we kind of knew wouldn't get on the football field all that much, that really could emerge as dudes on the inside of the defensive line. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah, on paper, if you lose Derek Carmen, if you lose Jamari Caldwell, holy smokes, Oregon's going to be depleted on the defensive line. Well, not when you recruit like Dan Lanning. Aiden Breland, 5-star prospect. You look at Jericho Johnson, top 100 guy. I mean, there's some talent there that you're kind of hoping gets developed the right way. On the edge, I think we know it's going to be Tatum and Mateo. I'm really excited about Elijah Rushing going into year 2, because we knew he wasn't a year 1 guy. He needed to develop, add a little bit more mass, add a little bit more physicality. The ceiling is so high for him. You know, does he start breaking out in year 2? That's probably the main storyline for me on the defensive line. Linebacker position, to me, is probably the biggest question mark. Bryce Betcher coming back is huge. Bryce Betcher played a lot of really good football for Oregon, kind of the leader of the defense. Devin Jackson, can he take the step and become a not just good linebacker? Can he be an All-American caliber guy? Because we know he can, and he's a freaky athlete for that size. This was probably the biggest concern for Oregon and kind of why they struggled the way they did against Ohio State. I just don't know if they had the speed at the second level. I mean, Ohio State was just getting the ball out in space, whether it was in the quick game in the passing attack or the rushing attack, and it to me seemed like Oregon's linebackers and safeties, they just weren't good enough and they just couldn't run with some of the talent that Ohio State had. And I think that's a position, Devin Jackson, that you want to inject some athleticism. You have one right there. Now can you put it all together? And then at the safety spot, adding Dylan Tieman's huge because Oregon didn't have that ball hawking, rangy free safety that can do a little cover one, be a single high safety, and have the range to make an impact all over the football field. Not a shot at guys like Kobe Savage or not Aaron Flowers, Rasheem Johnson. They weren't those kind of safeties. And when you're playing a team like Ohio State or you're playing like a team like Texas next year in the national championship, you got to have those guys. And I think Oregon brings in a guy like Dylan Tiemann, who I think is that guy. And then what is the development from Peyton Woodyard, Aaron Flowers, and Kingston Lopa, who I think are all really talented? Can one or two of those guys emerge as real difference makers in the back end to kind of satisfy what Oregon maybe lacked with Rasheem Johnson and Kobe Savage? Cornerback spot's disgustingly loaded. I mean, you could take your pick. I've been an iffy guy since he committed to Oregon. I think he could emerge as a starter. Jaleel Florence is coming back. Naheem Alford's a 5-star. Sione, Dakota Fields, Roger. I think you have confidence with all 6 of those guys. And the conversation I want to have is, all right, who plays the nickel? I think you just take one of those boundary cornerbacks and teach them how to play nickel, because I look at how talented the boundary cornerback position is for Oregon and say you got to try to get these kids on the football field. I put Theron Johnson there. Theron Johnson played very good on the boundary for Northwestern, but he tackles well. He's got a little bit more of a nickelback build. Maybe slide him in a nickel. I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see one or two of these really good boundary cornerbacks who might be buried a little bit because of how loaded that room is and go play nickel. I think that's the way I would look at it. Because again, when you're looking at this depth chart and when you're looking at this defense next year, it's college football is about the players, not about the plays. You got to get your best players on the football field. And I look at the cornerback spot and say, well, one of those guys is probably a guy you want to get on the football field. In this case, I went with Theron Johnson because I think he's got that nickel build. We'll cut it there. Oh, in terms of transfer portal additions, I think off-ball linebackers probably one. I just don't know if there's enough good. Like, I haven't seen an off-ball linebacker that jumps out to me and says, like, oh, yeah, he's coming in and playing right away here. Because I think it's solid. So I don't think there's a ton of work. Look, Dan Lanning, whenever he has the opportunity to make this team better, he will. This team is it's going to be a national championship caliber team in 2025. There's no way around that. Now, can you go maximize this team, play your best football in December and January? We'll pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.